Hello, my name is Leah. I am an aspiring fantasy author and a reader of fantasy, literary fiction, science fiction, sometimes horror. This month in my reading wrap-up I do have one horror book. This is only my third video on this channel now. I started this channel because I really want to start building a community of like-minded individuals who maybe have similar tastes in books as me, or who maybe are also writers and want to kind of follow along on my journey as I work towards getting published. This video is my July reading wrap-up video. I'll just chat a little bit about some of the books I read this month. I'm really far in the process of writing my novel. I am on my third draft and I'm so close to finishing that draft, so I've been really focusing on that. So I wanted to have a light reading month actually. So I picked a lot of short novels, and the first of the short novels that I read in July was James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. This is a realistic fiction book. It is a literary fiction book, and I was primarily interested in this because it is such a classic of gay literature, and it is so highly regarded. And I also love this a lot. I would give this 5 stars. The prose in this book is so beautifully written. It follows the story of this American man who is so deeply in the closet that he thinks he can outrun it by leaving the United States completely and going to Europe. And in Europe, though, he ends up meeting this Italian man who he falls in love with, and they have this relationship over the span of, I think, only a few months. So many of the characters in this book are so deeply flawed. The main character is, he's misogynistic, he has internalized homophobia, and he's transphobic. In chapter 2 there was this paragraph that really disturbed me as a trans person reading it. He is this man in this gay bar, and he is so closeted that he's convinced, even though he's in a gay bar, that he's not gay, that he's above all the others in there. And he's kind of just scanning the room, describing them, and trans women are kind of easier to punch down on because of how they can often be more outwardly perceived as queer or other. And so he's describing looking at these trans women as this sort of uncanny valley sensation that he also gets when he looks at apes in the zoo. And that was really hard to read, but I think that the metaphor was actually really, it really pays off when later in that chapter he ends up flirting with a man at the bar, and then he notices people are watching him, and so he flips that same metaphor onto himself, where he says, I've become the animal in the zoo. And because of that payoff, I found this passage that I found deeply disturbing and hurtful to be this really beautiful literary moment. And I really love this book for the chapters themselves. They're sort of long chapters, but they're all really perfect. They all have this beginning, middle, and end, and they come to this resolution, but still really propel the book forward. I think my only 2 small gripes with this book are how much it dwells on this internal conflict that the main character has with what it means to be American versus European, and I find that sort of boring. And then I also think that James Baldwin just kind of was having fun describing people at some points, where he would spend a page just describing a random woman who owns a cafe in Paris. I just felt like I didn't need a full page on just this description of this woman. It didn't really add to the story. I mean, I guess it adds atmosphere. And that was James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. The next book that I read this month was Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, another 5-star read. This is the story of a scientist who invites people to stay at this haunted house that he's rented out. One of the women that he invites to the house is the main character. Her name is Eleanor, and she is not very mentally well. She has spent most of her life taking care of her mother, who has, at the beginning of the book, recently passed, and she doesn't have a lot of life experience because of that. And she also is really prone to, I would say, almost maladaptive daydreaming, where in this first chapter, she's driving on her way to the haunted house where she'll stay all summer. She's having all of these daydreams. She'll see something on the side of the road and then just have this really complex, really detailed paragraphs and paragraphs daydream about that object. And it builds the suspense because it really makes you worry about her as a character, because you're thinking, she's so easily influenced and she so easily creates these narratives that being in a haunted house, even if it ends up not really being haunted, you know she's going to be negatively affected in some way, and you really start to worry about her. And then once she gets to the house, there's only 3 other people there for most of the book, and that is the scientist, Luke, this man he is the heir of the person who currently owns that house, so he's kind of there only as a representative of the owners. Then there is Theodora, who is this, I think, said to be bisexual woman, and this was written in the 50s, or maybe she's lesbian, I can't remember, who has this sort of slight inclination towards reading people's minds. And so there's this sort of surreal element of not knowing when she's kind of taking a look into the mind of the main character, which sort of creates this atmosphere of the walls of reality bending. And when the main character gets to the house and socializes with these people, there's this sort of odd effect that the house has on all of them, where it feels like at times they're almost age regressing or entering this dreamlike state where they're really, I think, sort of defensively acting very silly and playing pretend and kind of just talking nonsense with each other. And as a reader, that was at first really confusing, but once you get into the groove of the story, it starts to make sense, and it's really unnerving the way that they're able to sort of slip in and out of reality in their minds like that. It really is such a haunting story, and when the actual real ghost elements start popping up, because of all of that suspense and tension of shifting the walls of reality have already been set up and set in motion, it feels like these haunting moments don't kind of pop out of nowhere as these jump scares. They're these slow creeping moments that just stick with you. I love this so much. It's really gay. The ghost is a lesbian. I mean, I don't know if there's one ghost, but definitely one of the people who died in the house is heavily implied to have been gay. The main character is gay, and Theodora is gay, and that's really cool. Then I read The Eye of the Heron by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a Library of America book, which are these books that are usually like multiple novels in one by the same author, with and it looks really thin. That's because the paper is like Bible page thin. I kind of don't like that, but it is also a sewn binding, so it like stays open really nicely. So there's pros and cons. So yeah, this The Eye of the Heron is only one of the books out of 5 in this collection of 5 novels by Ursula K. Le Guin. And this is a sci-fi story about this planet far away from Earth called Victoria, and people on Earth sent these 2 ships there at 2 different times, but both of them were basically these like one-way ships sending people who were prisoners on Earth, actually, to set up colonies on this planet Victoria. And so there are these prison colonies basically on this alien planet, and there's a lot of tension between the 2 groups. The one that got there first kind of has more power, they have these cities established, and then the ones that got there second, they have these towns on the outskirts of the city, and they're really oppressed within this society. And the people who got there second, the town people, they call themselves the people of the peace, because on Earth they were these peaceful protesters who kind of had this sort of large immigration event happen where the governments that they immigrated to didn't like how many people they had massed and how much potential power they would have within the places that they went to. So the government sent them on the ship to this other planet, and so they're trying to use, because their ancestors were these protesters on Earth, they're trying to use these peaceful protest methods to fight the oppression of the city people who came on the other ship. And it's not working, because the city people are just violent and greedy, and they don't listen. And the other thing that is in the background of the story is this alien wilderness that they know nothing about, and it's untamable. They can't domesticate these animals. Whenever they bring them into captivity, they just die. They stop eating and they die. and they can hunt some of the fish. I mean, they can raise some crops too, but for the most part, they don't know anything about the wilderness. They don't know anything anywhere in the outskirts of this small area that they've populated. And the descriptions of the nature are just so beautiful. The characters, and this is my main problem with this book, is they didn't feel too fleshed out. They weren't that unique on their own. It was sort of more like this, the main character is the plot. It is this sort of dance between the nature, the city people, and then the town people. And it is written in this sort of omniscient, like head-hopping third-person narration where there isn't really one main character. You're kind of following multiple people who play parts in this story. And yeah, so that is The Eye of the Heron by Ursula K. Le Guin. And then I read Junji Ito's manga adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and I love Junji Ito and I love Frankenstein, but I would say I only liked this. So I haven't read the whole book yet because some of it is unrelated short stories, but I did read the entire section that is the adaptation of Frankenstein. So I think that all the choices were really interesting ones to make, and I enjoyed a lot of them. In Junji Ito stories, I think he's not afraid to make a really unlikable, evil, creepy main character who does terrible things. And I thought he would go in that direction, but he didn't. He's actually painting Victor in this really positive light, or at least a sympathetic light. And instead, the horror aspect is that this sort of drive to create this life as this mad scientist is sort of almost this fever that you can catch. So he kind of flips the switch between being this nice guy who just wants to get married and be a good person to being this sort of like mad scientist out of nowhere. It's really interesting because his friend Henry actually catches it too once, where he also has that switch flipped. It's almost like it's this like disease in the air that you can catch, and you just suddenly want to make a human out of dead bodies. And another interesting addition that I liked was the story of the Bride of Frankenstein, which they kind of collaged that in from the 1930s film. I also liked the way that they drew the monster. They made him really large, and I think I remember in the book that he's also described as really large. Just because it's a visual medium, you can just see how large he is here compared to Victor, who's standing there. And it really creates this uncanny, uneasy feeling of seeing that sort of just supernatural size difference. And yeah, so that is Junji Ito's Frankenstein. And then I read the novella Dragonfly by Ursula K. Le Guin, and this is a novella in the Earthsea series. I've been slowly making my way through the Earthsea series and loving my experience reading it. It is like my favorite book series of all time now. Dragonfly, however, I didn't love. It followed new characters. It follows this young woman named Dragonfly. In this world, women are not allowed to be trained mages or wizards. They're not allowed to go to the fancy magic schools. They have to be witches because of the sexism in this world. And the witches are like small town magicians who only know like what was passed down orally to them. They know like healing spells and herbal magic. They don't know these grand like wise wizard spells that you have to go to school to learn. But Dragonfly wants to do that, and so she goes on an adventure to try to get into the wizard school. And along the way, she is followed by this man who is a really evil, terrible man, and sometimes we are in the head of him, and it is a disturbing experience because of some of the thoughts he has about manipulating Dragonfly and trying to act like a nice guy, but he really has these ulterior motives of just trying to sleep with her. So we're sometimes in the head of the woman who wants to be a mage, and sometimes in the head of the mage who is manipulating the woman, and it was definitely an interesting story, but it wasn't my favorite in the Earthsea series so far. I would say I would give it like 3.5 stars. Yeah, so that was Dragonfly. And then I think this is the last thing I read this month, and it is The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. I have never read The Chronicles of Narnia. I saw the movie growing up, but I just randomly saw this in a little free library, and I decided to pick it up and give it a chance. I also was interested in it because in the beginning of Piranesi, which is one of my favorite books, there is a quote from The Magician's Nephew, and I can really see the influence here actually, especially in the first half. This is the story of a boy and a girl in like, I would say like around turn of the century era, who live in this sort of row house in London where their houses are connected, so they share a backyard. They meet each other there, they become friends. And it turns out that the boy, his mother is sick with cancer and dying, and he has to live with his aunt and uncle. And his uncle is really a weird guy. He has this like secret study in the attic where he's always disappearing to, and the boy, whose name is Diggory, he is not allowed up there. And the boy and the girl's name is Polly, they start playing together and they become friends, and they start exploring the attic of her house, and they find this crawl space that connects the attics, and through there they make their way to the uncle's attic study. And when they get in there, the uncle is like really pleased to see them, and he's acting very ominous and scary, and he has this tray of these yellow and green rings, and he tricks the kids basically into touching the rings, and when they do that, they're transported to another dimension. They're transported to this, he calls it the wood between worlds, where it's this very still forest, where it's not really its own world, it's just this like in-between place. And in the middle of the forest there are these puddles, and each puddle is a portal basically into another dimension, and there's like, I don't know actually how many they describe. It doesn't seem like that many, but I feel like there's like 100 or something portals to different worlds. These two kids start exploring the puddles, and in one of them they find this world that has basically ended. It's just these ruins of this great ancient city, and in the sky there is this dimming sun that's like this dark red color, and they find this woman frozen in one of the palaces, and they wake her up, or at least Diggory wakes her up with a magic bell that they find on a podium. And it turns out that this woman that they woke up is this evil empress queen with magic powers, and she killed her entire population of her planet with a single spell. And it's very much a metaphor for the atomic bomb, and just like the idea of a single human, having the power to kill that many people. But anyway, the first half of this book I really loved. It was the kids exploring the different portals, and I thought all the descriptions of the magic was so interesting, and I loved the story of the queen and her planet and how she destroyed it. The second half I did not love, and that was this sort of creation story of Narnia. And it is just the story of this beautiful lion god creating the world, and it's very much not even Christian undertones, it's like Christian overtones. It's a little heavy-handed for me, and I just thought it wasn't as interesting. It wasn't that different of a creation story from other ones in other mythologies and other religions, so it didn't feel as original as this beginning half of these kids jumping through these portal puddles. But I don't know, I'm still glad I read it because I love the first half so much, and I think there's just a lot of interesting magic world building in here that was really enjoyable. Yeah, so that was The Magician's Nephew. This is a hard one to rate, because I would say, because I love the first half, I would give the first half like 4.5 stars, but then the second half I would say it was only like 2.5, 3. So I guess it's another 3.5 star read for me, but yeah, that's The Magician's Nephew, and that was everything that I read in July, and I hope you stick around to see what I read in the future. I'll also have some videos documenting my writing process, my process of querying my book to agents, stuff like that. Thank you, and bye!